Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to the soaking wet Vaughn Manor. Yes, there's a very strange phenomena going on here at Vaughn Manor. It almost seems supernatural. No, it's not supernatural. I've looked it up on the internet. It's actually a scientific phenomena that's going on here. It's called rain. Water is falling from the sky. I know it sounds unbelievable, but it's true. You go outside, you just get wet because water is just pouring from the sky and just like everywhere. And it's crazy. You know, I've read about this phenomena, rain, here and there in books, but I just always assumed it was fictional. This sort of thing never happens in California, but it's happening now. You know, this is a sort of thing you expect to happen in some far-off exotic land, like Britain. But no, this isn't Britain. It's here, in California it's happening. But it's happening. Rain. Getting everything wet. But I think I'm probably safe enough here inside the manor. You never know. Kind of been crazy around here. So this has been an unpredictable week with a lot of bizarre things that have happened. For one thing, my schedule has been upended, so the time in which I normally read, I'm working. So that's kind of thrown me off. Well, the time that I normally read and the time I normally film, actually, also. So I've missed a couple of videos this week. Sorry about that for the few of you who noticed. Sorry, guys. I have returned. Lucky you to talk about all the stuff I read this week. Yes, Roger and I have returned for the weekend reading report, where I'm here to talk about all the stuff I read during this past week. So, I have been reading this, Edgar Rice Burroughs, The Man Who Created Tarzan by Erwin Porges. I've been reading this in the morning, but not this past week because I've had no time to read in the morning. Sorry, Man Who Created Tarzan. So I've been reading this for the Edgar Rice Burroughs deep dive, but not this week, unfortunately. So I've made no progress at all on that. I did read 2 books, though. I finished 2 books, I should say. I was hoping to finish 3, but I finished 2. So for those of you keeping score of the 500 book challenge, the challenge where I have to read 500 books that I own before I buy any new ones, this is number 17. Yes, 17. This is number 17. This is Edgar Rice Burroughs, The Warlord of Mars. Is it 17? God damn it, now I can't remember. I think it's 17. If not, I have it written down somewhere. Where is that? I don't know where I have it written down. I will correct it here if I am mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it's 17. You know, counting's difficult. But this is The Warlord of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. This was a very exciting and entertaining book. I've read this before, of course, although it has been a while since I've read it. This is part of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom series, Barsoom, the Martian's name for Mars, also known as the John Carter of Mars series. This series of books was a series of 11 books, if I'm remembering right. 10 or 11. I'm telling you, counting's difficult, but this is the 3rd, and originally this was supposed to be the last one. Edgar Rice Burroughs thought when he wrote this that this would be the final book in John Carter's adventures. Turns out this series was just too popular. He couldn't stop writing about the Mars adventures. He did change some things up after this book, though. Instead of John Carter being the hero of the following book, Thuvia, Maid of Mars, he made Carthoris, John Carter's son, the hero of that book. And then we have a few books where there are different protagonists. Eventually, John Carter returns later on in the series to narrate his adventures again. But there was a period in the middle of this series where there were other action heroes on Mars telling their stories, or having their stories told by Edgar Rice Burroughs. But originally this was supposed to wrap up the Mars series, and it does read that way. In fact, the first 3 books are often referred to as the Martian Trilogy, even though there were a lot of books after that, just because it seems to wrap up John Carter's story so well. Most of this book is all about John Carter trying to rescue Dejah Thoris, his princess, from various Martian villains. But the book is a lot better than just that simple synopsis. There are a lot of things that happen in this book. Very episodic, as you would expect from an Edgar Rice Burroughs book. Full of action and thrills and cliffhangers. John Carter reaches the ultimate heights at the end of this book when he gains the title, the Warlord of Barsoom. So that is where the title of the Warlord of Mars comes from. So yeah, I loved it. A lot of fun. I have to say, though, there were a lot of moments which are kind of moments that you sometimes get, or very often get in Edgar Rice Burroughs books, where you're just like, oh, come on! You know, there are moments like that strain credulity. I have to say about John Carter, much as I love John Carter, he is very different from Tarzan. Tarzan always seems like, when you read the Tarzan books, at least from what I remember, he always seems pretty on top of things. He always seems pretty sharp, you know, like he pretty much knows the score. John Carter very often doesn't seem like the sharpest sword on the rack, if you know what I mean. There are plenty of things that he should know in this book that he doesn't. Plenty of boneheaded moves in this book. But, you know, it's all part of the fun. We love John Carter even if he isn't the brightest guy around. He is the best fighter on 2 worlds. We know this because he's always telling us. So, yeah, The Warlord of Mars. I loved it. This is a great book. I love the Martian series by Edgar Rice Burroughs. It's a ton of fun. When I say great book, I mean it's tremendously entertaining. Not that it's like a masterpiece of literature. So, yeah, I know. But, you know, the Edgar Rice Burroughs Deep Dive coming along very well. Now, after that, I intended to read this. This is Astounding Science Fiction Magazine from January 1951, but I pushed this back because I read this book instead. Because Richardson Reads over on his channel is doing a group read of this book. He's doing a group read of the Hornblower series. This is the first book in the Hornblower series of Naval Adventures. And it's great. This book is great. This was a book of how many? I think this was another book series of 11. Was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11? It's 11 books, unless I'm counting incorrectly. Counting's hard. So I have the whole set of these because my stepfather loved these books. He loved C.S. Forester's Hornblower books, and he read them over and over and over again. I remember all throughout my childhood, my stepfather would read these. Loved them. Just loved them. So you'd think I would have read them before now, since my stepfather was one of the people that influenced me the most as far as the kind of things that I read. But I never really did. And then I inherited his set of battered old paperbacks when he passed away. And so I'm just now reading them, and I really see what he saw in them, because this is such a fun book. Tremendously entertaining. This is about Mr. Midshipman Hornblower. This is before Hornblower became such a badass of the sea. I think that was his official title later on in the series, Hornblower, Badass of the Sea. But at this point, he's not even a lieutenant yet. He's an acting lieutenant by the end, but he's Mr. Midshipman Hornblower. So just at the beginning of his career, he's very green. He's not used to this sailing on the high seas and being an officer thing yet. So he's very insecure. about a lot of things. And it's just tremendously entertaining and fun to be here at the beginning of his career. Now, I have not read, unlike a lot of people who've read Hornblower, I have not read any of the other Hornblower books yet. We're reading one of these a month. And so this is my first exposure to this character. So that's kind of cool. I will be going along chronologically. This was not the first book that Forrester wrote about Hornblower. But chronologically, this is the first book. So I'll be going along with Hornblower and his career. Loved it. Absolutely loved this book. Highly recommend it. Again, this is even more episodic than The Warlord of Mars. This is almost a series of short stories, because every chapter kind of tells its own story. Although they all lead one from one to the other. It's a great book. Fantastic. All the praise that I've heard about this series, I see that it is warranted. This is great. So yeah, Mr. Midshipman Hornblower, this is the other book I read, so this is book number 18. Book number 18, I'm pretty sure, in the 500 book challenge. So that's moving right along. So those are the two books I finished. Then I have returned to the Edgar Rice Burroughs Deep Dive. This is the next Edgar Rice Burroughs book that I'm reading. This is The Mad King. I'm reading this right now. What page am I on? I am on page 73. I'm on page 73 out of how many pages? 255. Yes, 255 pages. I was able to see it even without my glasses. Impressive. So, The Mad King, this started off kind of, but it got really good really quickly. So this is a lot of fun. I haven't read this since I first read it when I was a teenager. So the last time I read this, I was probably 17 or 18. Somewhere, I might have even been younger than that, actually, when I read this. So of course I don't remember it all that well, which is good. So it's kind of like reading it for the first time since I'm so darn old now. But great, and look at that, fantastic. I know I showed it last week, but that's just a fantastic early Frank Frazetta cover to this first paperback printing of The Mad King that was put out by Ace. It's a lot of fun. And then now, after that, I'm going to be reading Astounding Science Fiction, January 1951. I'm going to read this as soon as The Mad King is finished. And then I will be going right back to Edgar Rice Burroughs for the next book that Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote. Now, it's a little tricky because these are each books that are comprised of two novelettes that he wrote for the pulps. And if I'm remembering right, he wrote a novelette for this, The Mad King. And then some of the characters from this book show up in this book. And he wrote these two novelettes that make up this book, The Eternal Savage. And then some of the characters from this book come back and show up back in The Mad King. So it's sort of like you read half of this, then you really should read this, and then read the rest of this. But that's too confusing, so I'm just going to read that and then read this. This is The Eternal Savage, which originally was titled The Eternal Lover. But I guess The Eternal Lover was just too scandalous of a title. So if you're a paperback reader in the 60s, you might think it was about something else if it had that title. So they probably wisely changed the title to The Eternal Savage. The Eternal Savage is probably a better title. That's a great cover by Krenkel. I've seen this cover used not only for this, but have I seen this cover used for a Pellucidar book? I've seen this, or maybe it was Tarzan at the Earth's Core. I can't remember. But I've seen this cover used on a different book. I just can't remember what book it is. But this is The Eternal Savage by Edgar Rice Burroughs. This actually also has an appearance from Tarzan and Jane in it. Sorry, I actually had to edit something out because my garbage cans fell down outside because it's windy. And you were no help at all. I had to go outside and take care of the garbage cans because there's lots of wind to go along with this crazy rain. Where was I? Oh, yes. The Eternal Savage. And yeah, Tarzan and Jane, who are now settled down. They're now settled down now in this book. They show up in this before they have further adventures. And this is actually the first appearance, I believe, of Tarzan's son, who later on in the series becomes Korak the Killer. But now he's just, not Korak the Killer because he's just a baby in this book. And then I think he's also a baby in the next... Yeah, he's also a baby in the next Tarzan book that shows up, which is Beasts of Tarzan, which comes after this. But yeah, Tarzan shows up in here. And Jane and, all the people, the Custers who were in this, I believe, if I'm remembering right, they all show up in here. So it's kind of cool because we must remember that all of Edgar Rice Burroughs' adventures, the Mars series, the Inner World Polluster series, the Venus series, Tarzan, they all exist in one shared universe. Edgar Rice Burroughs created a shared universe before, it was popular. So this one is going to be the next one I read after I finish this. And I don't know what I'm reading after that. I did read a couple comics this week because I'm working my way through this fantastic book, the Fantastic Four Omnibus. I am going to attempt to read. This is another thing I'm doing, which is completely impossible. I'm going to try to read every single graphic novel or comic book collection that I own. And I own so many, and I keep getting more. So, because these aren't part of the 500 book challenge. So that's impossible, but I will attempt the impossible. So this week, because I didn't have much time to read, I only had time to read a couple of stories in here. The first story I read this week, where was it? It was Fantastic Four number 10, because this is how far I had gotten before this week in this book. Now in this story, Dr. Doom switches his brain with Reed Richards. And so Reed Richards actually has Dr. Doom's mind. And so even though Reed Richards spends all the time in this book with this crazy, evil, villainous expression on his face and acts completely like Dr. Doom and not like Reed Richards at all, the other members of the Fantastic Four can't figure out what's going on. Even though Reed Richards as Dr. Doom is telling them exactly what's going on, they don't buy it, even though this is what Dr. Doom as Reed Richards looks like through the whole story. So it's a hell of a lot of fun, though. I really enjoyed it. So that was cool. I read that. And then I read this. This is issue number 11 of the Fantastic Four. This was not as cool. This is where the Fantastic Four meet the Impossible Man, who is basically, if you remember Mr. Mxyzptlk from Superman, you probably don't. But he's like this little character that can just do anything and causes a bunch of mischief. This character, the Impossible Man, is basically that. And it's not the best issue of Fantastic Four in the world. But the next one I'm reading has the Hulk in it. So that's going to be awesome. So those are the comics I read this week. Not very many. Like I said, this week has been kind of a bust as far as reading has been concerned. I do think I'm going to read this one probably this weekend because I'm going to be talking about this with Steve Donahue in the near future. Not the next Comic Book Wednesday, but maybe the one after that. It's been a long time since I've read this, so I want to see what it's like. Now, I probably haven't read this since it came out, actually, back in the late 80s. Was it 87? I can't remember, but I'll find out. Because it's probably in print that's too small for me to read, right? No, actually, I can read it. It's 1988 when this came out. So yeah, I'll be reading that. Wasn't this a thrill-packed episode? Man, I know. Thrilling stuff. Okay, well, Roger and I will probably see you tomorrow. I have no idea what tomorrow is going to be. I think I'm going to attempt. I'm going to attempt tomorrow to do a Robert E. Howard show, because I haven't done that in a long time. And I've actually got a very special Robert E. Howard show planned. So catch me then. Okay, guys, I will see you next time.